All right. With the conclusion of our workout theme elevator music, I welcome you to summer camp. This is the sixth and unfortunately the last installment of the summer camp. That means back to work, back to school, back to other things. But we're ending camp with a real compelling speaker, and we're going to be tackling a small but mighty topic around research and collaboration in life sciences. So before I introduce our speaker, let's talk again a little bit about kind of camp rules real quick. We will be recording this. The intent of these series is to be educational and collaborative. We don't have all of the answers, but we hope to inspire those who are thinking about the space, who are thinking differently, and perhaps you educate us. And so as much as we love these sessions, we want them to be educational and spur on future conversations. You can pin your speakers in case someone goes on mute, and you get to watch their cube. Myself and Dr. Florissi will be your main conduits today. Question and answers, you can use the in-call chat. There's also the Q&A function. I'll do my best to kind of hunt around in both of those and answer your questions. If we don't get through everything, which usually I fail to do because we're going down tangents and rabbit holes and fun stuff, we will do our best afterwards to kind of document the questions and then write them up as best as we can. Again, to avoid the Socratic and didactic experience, we really encourage you guys to ask questions because this is your time. And then lastly, just etiquette. Camp rules is try to mute if you can. We do have the master mute, but we all know those experiences when that one person goes off and leaves it. So with that, I'd love to introduce our featured speaker today. Dr. Florissi is the technical director at the Office of the Chief Technology Office here at Google Cloud. What is, you might hear Octo or the Office of CTO. It really is, I would say, the proverbial brain trust here at Google Cloud. The best of the best of the best. These minds kind of think tirelessly around hairy and meaty challenges, free of kind of the work of sales and engagement and engineering, but really have that time and the mental muscle and certainly the intellectual fortitude to tackle meaty topics. And so it's an absolute delight to have Dr. Florissi here today talking about her experience in this wonderful moment in time with AI in the space of life science. And so with that, Dr. Florissi, absolute welcome. Maybe kind of explain a little bit about yourself and, what's new.
Fantastic. So it's an honor and a privilege to be here today with you, Dr. Morris, and participate in this healthcare life science summer camp. A privilege, and I want to thank you for having me here today. Just for clarification, I'm originally from Brazil. The Italian last name, like everything else in my life, is my husband's fault, and I can prove that, and that's where the accent comes from. I have been with Google Cloud for over 4 years now as part of the CTO office, and we work with very, very strategic customers, and we say that we actually try to push the edge of technology and where technology would be. I am super excited today because I have been working with healthcare and life sciences for some time, especially in the last year with some key life science customers. And I think that they have, or they are the lighthouse of a very interesting set of patterns that we are seeing across the industry. And that's what we want to talk about today. Thank you.
Well, fantastic. So maybe we kind of start there. life science and the domain, I mean, is massive in terms of drug discovery all the way to what we call, bench to bedside. And the application and the utility of AI is certainly, infinite. We could talk probably for days. Can you help us kind of ground us on the area of domain that you see, a real excitement, and then kind of educate us on, how that fits or, across the life science continuum?
Fantastic. We say that America runs on donuts, life sciences runs on documents. It is a very, very highly regulated industry to start with. It's very content intensive. It has a tremendous amount of details that you really need to pay attention, because you're dealing with lives. And when drugs come to market, you can impact the life of many positively and negatively as well. So we really have to be careful. But I think that one of the things that actually called my attention is that if you look into the drug development life cycle, you have the drug discovery, the drug development per se, and the drug delivery. And within drug development, this is a process that lasts over, on average, 8 to 12 years or more. And during that period of time, there are at least 150 different types of documents that get generated along the way. Those document instances, the instances of those document types actually can amount for a single drug over a period of 10 years in the range between 20,000 to 25,000. So now, if you actually look at a particular life sciences company that may have been in the drug development cycle, typically associated with clinical trial for, I don't know, tens of drugs, they are dealing simultaneously with hundreds of thousands of documents. That's number one. There are a lot of documents that need to be tracked. Another interesting point is that those documents, they actually have a pipeline of behavior. So you have, in the case of drug development, you have a study protocol that's like the seed, the baton that gets passed from drug discovery to drug development. And that would be the seed, or what we call the source document for an informed consent form, that will then become the source of another document or set of documents in the pipeline. So there is a sequence where a behavior, a pattern, where you have a set of source documents that are used to generate the next document in the sequence, that is then combined with others, or maybe solo used to generate the next document in the sequence, and so on and so forth. So the second point that we are saying is, number one, there is an obscene amount of documents that need to be created. Details cannot be lost. The second point is that they have a pipeline behavior. And the number three is that the subject matter expert, the medical staff, the scientists that actually alter those documents, they are highly qualified individuals, very hard to hire, to find, and to train. And they spend a great percentage of their time doing repetitive tasks of finding in the source document the information that they need to literally cut and paste into the new doc. And we want, and we saw the opportunity of applying AI, and I loved what Dr. Morris said, when the number of possibilities is infinite, you get analysis paralysis. You do not know where to apply AI first, or you are thinking that a model is a solution, that you send to the model a study protocol and say, hey, give me an ICF that looks exactly like the voice of my company. And it doesn't work like that. And what we have identified in conjunction with some of our strategic customers is that one key application of generative AI is in augmenting the knowledge worker in life sciences in the process of document authoring, document creation along the document pipeline.
Do you see a subtle, I don't want to say paradox, but on one end, so you mentioned kind of the exponential growth of the document, and each document then kind of, can probably spawn off and create several others through note, load, cut, and paste. Clinically, we experience that all the time. Authoring, though, with AI, does that accelerate? I mean, does that actually make the needle in the haystack problem worse because you're actually using AI to create more hay?
So it's a brilliant point, actually, because are you accelerating the madness, or are you actually controlling the madness, or are you doing both?
Yeah.
We actually take a very optimistic approach. And we say, look, it needs to be tamed. If Shakespeare were alive, he would write how you tame the generative AI madness, not the shrew. But so you really have to do a couple of things. Number one is make sure that the generative AI has the guardrails necessary to, I would even go as far as saying, eliminate hallucination in the process. So you have to add constraints to the generative AI process to say, we want you to take content from the source documents. When you do not find the information, do not hallucinate. A no answer is much better than a wrong answer in the process. We are not saying by any means that generative AI is going to eliminate the work of the medical staff. Please, we are not. We are saying is that generative AI is going to have a positive impact on the work of the medical staff. Number one, we want to reduce or even eliminate the activity of finding the information in the source document, cutting and pasting, and putting in the additional doc. That's number one. Number two, we want the medical staff to spend time in analyzing, reviewing, evaluating the content that was generated by the generative AI using the source documents as reference, reviewing, approving versus searching and cutting and pasting, right? And number three, yes, it's going to increase the number of documents that are going to be generated, not because we are generating more documents, but because we believe that by accelerating the clinical trial process, life science organizations will be able to study more drugs with the same number of resources that they have. They will be able to increase the accuracy and the completeness of the documents that they create. So you can go to a generative AI and say, I want you to look at this study protocol and really yield all of the potential side effects, even the ones that may not be explicitly listed, but they could be easily inferred by adding one or the other together. And so we want to increase accuracy. We want to bring completeness, comprehensiveness of the document that gets created. And we want this process to be at a lower cost. So life sciences companies will be able to bring safer, more drugs to market with the same resources.
No, I love it. It's finding the pearl in the oysters. Someone way smarter than me once, everyone knows Moore's law, right? The exponential. Have you heard of Aram's law?
No.
Oh, you'll like this. This is a good one. So Moore's, spelled backwards, is Aram's law. Aram's law is actually an interesting study for life science, and actually follows the exact same curve. Unfortunately, it's the time to market and the cost. So if you actually look at over time, the cost of life science drug discovery and the time to market, it's gone up. Not in a way that we would say this is a good thing, right? It's not the Moore's law dropping; it's the other direction. So, it's a fun pearl, Aram's law, throw it around. But it sounds like that's what you're talking about, right? Your knowledge workers are spending an inordinate amount of time hunting for information, searching, as opposed to assimilating and drawing insights. So where are you seeing this? Like, so documents are all over for a drug company. Where are you eating the elephant? How are you breaking this all apart, or are you treating it all as like, let's magically do this across the pipeline?
So first of all, I remind everybody, we computer scientists are not magicians at all. So we will not magically do this across the pipeline. We use a very methodological process. We actually look at the pair of source documents and derived documents. So study protocol, informed consent form, and so on and so forth. And we actually do this process for the pairs, and we try to identify what we call repeatable patterns. What is it in the process of taking these source documents and generating the next one in the pipeline? So from a mathematical perspective, you take a set of n documents that were generated up to the nth step in the pipeline, and you generate n plus 1, right? So we look at and we say, what can we generalize? And I'm happy to share a couple of learnings with you. Repeatable patterns here is that life sciences, because life sciences is not a recent industry, it has been there, thank God, for a couple of hundreds of years. You actually have a lot of documents that have been generated. The archival is huge. So we can actually look at what the document n plus 1 in the document pipeline looks like. We have examples, we have samples, so we can easily infer a template. So we use the template that we can abstract using generative AI for generative AI, right? As I like to call, like the Constitution, for the people, by the people, with the people. Then we have generative AI first actually looks at what are the patterns in document n plus 1 in the pipeline? What are the dependencies between n plus 1 and the source documents? And can we generate a template for n plus 1? Now we use that template, we guide the generative AI, and we say, look, we want to generate n plus 1. It should follow this template. And then we can also have ways to verify whether the content can be found in the original documents and where hallucination was used or not. And I think that is one pattern that we found is applicable not only to life sciences, but to other industries. So we went to the judiciary system, and we looked at the legal cases. And legal cases, especially those that go to the Supreme Court and have appeals, they actually have a sequence of documents that are generated. And document n plus 1 is also sourced from the prior documents by extracting content, which also may give rise to other documents in the pipeline. And because the judiciary system is not a young industry, we also have a lot of samples and templates. And then I'll give you one more industry, insurance. If you're doing claims, be it for auto accidents or loss and theft, or if you're looking for insurance claims in healthcare, the same pattern. You have a document pipeline. The industry is not young. You have well-defined forms. You have well-defined templates. So this knowledge worker becomes much more augmented, much more efficient, much more accurate, and much more comprehensive, cohesive in the analysis that it provides.
No, I love listen, in healthcare, like them or hate them, we have to work with the judicial side of the house and insurance. So hey, that's actually, those are perfect adjacencies. I'm actually fascinated from a computer science standpoint. Even if you reduce down to a process like a template, humans are varied. So while we say we follow a process, computers are expecting not a high degree of variation. Are you seeing a lot of variation, or actually are we doing pretty good jobs that actually the training data is of high enough quality or a big enough N to deal with that first year postdoc who's now working at Lilly versus the 25-year veteran? I'm just curious, from a data science standpoint, how are you managing just the variability of humans?
That's another brilliant question, I have to say, because
I know that I don't follow the rule brick, so I don't know if it's brilliant or just I'm speaking. I'm confession.
No, you are using the right rationale. And I would like us to challenge and say, look, a couple of things are happening in technology at the same time. It is not just generative AI that has been trained on a large corpus of data that may include so many samples that the job out of the box, I would say out of the model, is good enough to identify templates. But we also have multimodal. And multimodal allowed us to have a much more cross-dimension, multiple dimension, I would say, view of the document. It's not just text. You have pictures, you have graphs, you have tables. So that has enriched beyond belief our understanding of the document content itself, and allowed us to do some validation, some kind of cross correction. So when you have insurance, you have a picture of the accident or a picture of some of the medical records that you can cross correlate. And on top of that, you actually have large context window. And the large context window is as if you almost had the ability of influencing the output of the model at the last time, because at the last minute, I'm sorry, because what you're doing is to say, look, model, you were trained on all of the public data available. I am company X. I have my own archival, and I would like to provide a bunch, or I like to use a number, obscene. Obscene for me is very close to infinite, but you can count. It's very big, but you can count. It's finite. So you have this obscene amount of documents that you may use for many different purposes. One of them is fine-tuning the model. You may do that. Another one is to just provide in the large context window. Another one is to say, let me pre-process all of the documents that have been offered by a company using generative AI, inferring patterns, inferring templates, looking and understanding the voice of the enterprise, profiling, creating an opinion, and offering that as part of the context. So I just want us to actually say, it's not just the model. Yes, we have generative AI, which has transformed the way we do business. But there is also multimodality, which is expanding the way we see the world and our ability to double and triple check things, together with large context window and the ability to look at very closely and analyze and reason on private content in the confines of an enterprise that can be used for fine-tuning, but also has a lot of content knowledge that can be derived and added in the large context window.
And so, as a company, or you're deploying this and building it, how are you managing those models? How are you operate, like, things change over time, protocols change over the time. How do you make sure that, you don't have stale models? Like, what's that? So it's great that you have the models, but like, I imagine there's a whole operational component and orchestration component that's probably equally as important.
I think that, again, I will repeat it multiple times. A model is not a solution. So if a model is not a solution, then you actually need a pipeline. You need a process, a generative AI process that takes from the data, processes the data, massages the data, adds prompts, adds guardrails, and it looks at the results, analyze the results, double check, triple check, and so on and so forth. That entire workflow, let's call it the Gen AI workflow, that can be programmed, that can be designed, that can be made operational, has to follow what I call Gen AI ops. A lot of people call ML ops, which was associated with machine learning. I believe that Gen AI ops expands machine learning ops, because now you have to keep track of many more parameters to the process. What is the temperature that you use for the model? What were the number of tokens? How, which model, which version of the model have you used? And if you didn't know the version of the model, what date did you call the API? Because companies are constantly changing the magician behind the black curtain. So you're using an API, and the model that is serving or that API changes constantly. So now you need to keep track of the data. You need to do version control on your prompts. You need to do version control on the ground truth. You need to create a data set that gives you a baseline, so that you know that when you give this input, this is the expected output or the set of expected outputs. And whenever you make any change to that workflow, you need to go back and check, did I break anything? So software engineering did not die. All the principles of software engineering need to be applied, but they need to be applied into a broader, kind of more complex workflow.
Is, as you do this work and say non-regulated adjacencies, so let's say insurance, we'll put the judicial system on the side, but tackling something in a highly regulated market where, ultimately this would touch a patient, but also the billions that a corporation's investing, and so the stakes are high. Or even submitting to a regulatory agency, right, where they need to kind of understand the thought process, show me your work. Like, is it early on where we haven't answered all of those questions of how these powerful tools such as generative AI, it's a little bit of a black box, the explainability, how that works in a regulated environment? Is it, something that we already kind of have the answers? Like, how should people in this call think about these tools? Because you hear in the lay press, at least for lay people like me, it's a black box. We don't necessarily know how it's done, but it's grounded, it looks good. But I would imagine, especially if it's a lab notebook or whatever, you want to be able to stand by your work. Ultimately that scientist who is signing it or submitting it is responsible for the authorship. And how does he or she think about that?
I like to say that people usually say, hey, a lot of data is lost in translation, right? No data lineage should be lost in integration. And I will give you a concrete example, right? So you are actually creating a document, and you highlight a sentence of the document and you say, hey, generative AI, please give me some information. And generative AI will give you a data that it found on the internet, a combination of it, and you actually replace the highlighted content. We envision a world where that editorial piece that actually happened should have a data lineage associated with it that could be tracked, that could be used as evidence. Look, I am actually not just doing a simple text editing, I am enriching content with facts, with research. I am grounding this work on some information that I found. So we believe that chat was the first debutant, massive debutant application that reached the masses, where the surface where generative AI was used to lend to the broader community, to hundreds of millions of people.
Yep.
We believe that the next killer app, that the next surface is going to be the productivity tool. It's going to be the text editors like Google Docs. It's going to be the sheets like Google Sheets, the spreadsheets. Is going to be the slides. And when the generative AI meets the knowledge worker where the knowledge worker is, that the knowledge worker doesn't need to leave his, her, their environment, that the activity of keeping track of where that information came from becomes part of the tool, that we cannot lose the process of generation, explainability, generation of the content itself. So imagine that your content that you actually created is not only may have a hyperlink, but it may have a hyperlink not to a site, but to an entire history of where that data came from. And that can be naturally used for regulatory binding. It can be used for explaining the rationale that a medical staff, that an author had, the choices the author made, the reasons why the author favored one option versus the other. So you are now able of capturing the entire subject matter expert process that was used in the content creation.
No, I love that you just flipped my naive statement around the, it'll be the perils and it'll hallucinate as into one of, it is synthesizing, it's stitching together these nodal relationships that actually help buttress the support of an idea, hypothesis, theory, action, as opposed to contributing to, more entropy, tossing out some thermodynamics. So you also kind of mentioned kind of this whole document life cycle and breaking it down into these kind of microservices. Talk to us, like, how do you, since it is a continuum, like, how do you break it apart? Where do you break these things apart? Because they're kind of all interdependent. So what's the art and science around, breaking these apart at appropriate junctures, so you're not contributing to information loss or process loss?
So as computer scientists, we have always struggled with the division of labor. How do you actually create those chunks of functionality that we put in a function, or that we may put in a library, or that we may package as a microservices? And those are all technology terms for saying, how do you decomposition a task? How do you decouple the functionality and create autonomous parts that are each responsible for a specific activity. And I think that there are maybe at least two lines of thinking today in technology that both, in my humble opinion, are applicable to life sciences. One of them is if you actually look at a process-based flow. So I actually take the document pipeline and I break the pipeline, the step from going to document N to document N plus one is the generation of the document in the next timeline, and I divide that as an action. And I say this action gets as parameters templates of the next phase. And I actually get the content from the previous one, the previous source documents as input, and I generate the next one, right? So you could say that's a way of dividing and conquer, and I stitch them together. If I want to go at the lower level of the stack, which is maybe approach number two, is to say within that document authoring process, I am going to put guardrails every time that I call the generative AI. I am going to capture the information of what model did I use, because we have flexibility of using a different generative AI model for each paragraph in the document creation, right? So I may use a document that is specialized in table summarization, another model that may be specialized in translating complex medical terms into what a layman could understand without requiring, going to medical school, and so on and so forth. So I can divide it there. And another trend that is just emerging, which I think it has a lot of potential in life sciences, is what is being called agentic workflow. So for every part of the process, you actually create those agents that play different roles, and they're based on different models in the pipeline. So for example, let's say that you generated a consent form and you want to do a test whether that consent form has any hallucination. So it is as if you hire an agent that says, that I go to that agent and I say, I do not trust the work of the generative AI that created the consent form.
Yeah.
Can you actually take that consent form and make sure that you find, if any, information that is not present in the study protocol? And then you ask another agent to say, even though that other agent told me there is no hallucination, how can I improve the content? Can you find any information that was in the study protocol that should be in the consent form that didn't make? And you create an entire board of quality control and intelligence building to improve the process along the way.
I love it. Like buoys along the way to safely navigate you across and the agents of agents is fascinating. So
yes.
So you're obviously at the cutting edge, the tip of this, and compelling, unbelievable new computer science space with old school archaic processes. But how real and is this? Like how are you seeing this being deployed back to Aram's law? Like, are you seeing the positive momentum? I mean, these are compelling theories, and I think all of us kind of recognize and it makes sense intuitively, but the rubber hits the road in application and execution. I'm just curious, is it tomorrow? Is it 1 year out, 5 year? Or
so can I say, Mark Twain said, the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed, right?
yes.
I would say that the present is a moment that is made for where generative AI meets the humble. And I will tell you what I mean by that. There are people that say, hey, generative AI can solve world's hunger. And I'm going to start there. We are a long way. We are a long way. And that is the future. But maybe because of the position that you are in life, or because of your aspirations, or whatever reason that may be, you focus on the long term, and it's going to take time to get there. But the other approach is to come from a position of humbleness that at Google, we live that every day and saying, what are the mundane, maybe small activities that may not give us the Turing Award, the Nobel Prize, and it may not get us on TV, but that may really change the trajectory of history, the trajectory of science in the long term. And typically, those are small things that are repetitive, that when they happen over and over and over again unconsciously, they become error prone, they become inefficient, but they are very easy to automate. And a lot of people are saying, I do not want to do that. So when I talk about document authoring that I am very passionate, is saying, are you crazy? We are at the cusp of the Gemini era. We are at this huge inflection point, and you're going to worry about documents. And the answer is, if I don't, who will? And I actually believe that automating the foundational part of life sciences, document authoring being one of them, if you actually free capacity of your subject matter experts, then they can focus on higher order activities that by using generative AI as well, they will then influence life sciences. So it is as if we have to do the job of enabling the enabler that will then make the trajectory function. We are taking, as in Hollywood, a supporting role of actually enabling the stars to actually have the freedom and the bandwidth to make the difference.
No, I love that. I mean, that supporting plug, to support those knowledge workers. The models and what we create today aren't going to be the Turing test winner and the Nobel. It's unlocking the unbelievable human capital and brain power, and that in and of itself would lead to bigger and brighter things. It's highly altruistic, but it makes sense. Going after the mundane and unsexy is really, really important, because it allows us to be human and do the great things that we are great at. We are up on time, but what wakes you up in the morning, and what keeps you up at night? What's what is exciting? What are and as camp closes, when people think about AI, we're in this moment. Is it what should get them absolutely excited?
From a technology standpoint, I would say that multimodality has not received yet the attention that it needs. I don't know if you know, one of the most famous paper at Google, it says attention is all you need. Sure. That's where the transform architecture was created. So multimodality has not gotten the attention that it deserves. And I want to make a parallel very quickly, if I may. Humans actually have 5 senses. We touch, we taste, we smell, we see, and we hear. And we receive signals from the world through those 5 mechanisms, willing it or not, right? We have sensibility and so on and so forth. But then we have only one brain. And when you actually bring all of those signals in one brain, you bring different dimensions, and you can draw higher order reasoning on top of that. And multimodality is a case for the first time in history. We are giving pairs, triplets to models and saying, this is the text, this is the voice, this is the audio interpretation, this is the image, and so on and so forth, and giving the model the ability of understanding a different tone in voice is associated with a negative sentence. It's the sound of a smile or the face with a smile is associated to positive news. And this is transformational. But what keeps me awake at night, to close, is that when the wheel was invented, right, we didn't come up with the car. It took us years to use the wheel and create an automotive and create airplanes and so on and so forth. Okay. People believe that generative AI, or people may believe that generative AI is your jet, your private jet. I believe that generative AI is the wheel.
Yep.
And what keeps me awake at night is figuring out what the car, what the airplane, what the jet would look like. Thank you.
Well, I love that as a closing theme. So number one is I want to thank Dr. Florissi. I mean, the passion, the knowledge, and how you frame things is over the top. But I also think it is a sobering call to action is, while the technology, whether it be Google or others, is profound in a wheel, I think it's incumbent for everyone on this call to be thinking about, well, what do I do with this opportunity? How do I seize it? And so I think, to that end, I wish to extend a debt of gratitude to our customers and partners, because they're the ones who actually help us be smart and think about these. So with that said, I bid you all, camp is over. You can't stay here, but don't go. You can't go. No, don't stay here, but go home. But in any case, we hope to continue camp next year, and perhaps there's going to be a remedial school throughout the year, but we'll be sending out more to all of you. So with that, thank you so much and have a lovely day. Bye-bye.